Hey guys, it's Danny coming to you live, not really, from a very noisy corner of the world. Sorry about the noise, but yeah, it's there. We can't do anything about it. Today we will discuss about two sickly orchids that have been sent to me to save. And oh my, these are some very beautiful and special to me orchids. And they are two Vandaceous orchids, one of which has blooms. Let's just get the names out of the way. This is the Vanda Palmer, one of the Vandaceous orchids that I always kind of wanted to have. She was in my top wish list and now I finally have it. And the other one is a Rinco Vanda Colmarie. Now, you don't know this one. I know it for 5 years already because one of our forum members, well, the local forum I used to be on a lot of years ago, had one and it was beautiful. It has very dark purple flowers which are supposed to smell divine. The Mimi Palmer is as well very fragrant, and these little flowers that manage to hang on in transport are super fragrant. They are very sweet, reminds me of the Denisoniana, but even sweeter than that. So it's a bit like honey mixed in with maybe a little bit of chocolate. It's a beautiful scent. I am over the moon for having these orchids. However, they are far from being healthy, or maybe I shouldn't say that, they're just not healthy at all. Now, I received them both from Jessica once again, and she wrote to me that these are some saves and she hopes that I can make them recover again. And when I opened the box, I didn't really understand what was the problem because they both seemed okay. Yes, dehydrated, particularly the Mimi Palmer. You can still see the leaves are very closed in. A Vanda, which is dehydrated, has closed in leaves. So yes, I did see the dehydration signs, but both of these orchids seem to have quite a nice root system at a first glance. So the first thing that I did yesterday was just hydrate them for a few hours in the buckets. And somewhere at night, when I finished my chores, I came to work on them and oh boy, these orchids are really not so healthy. It was very dark to film, so I just took some photos. I started to cut away the dead roots. On Vanda orchids, whatever root looks very thin and desiccated, feels papery when dry and pretty much lifeless when wet, those are the roots which are dead. So I started to cut away all of these roots. I started off with the Mimi Palmer, and this one already had quite a few nice roots. You can see here, these are the roots that are left. They are very thick, very full of substance. They green up when they're wet, although, a little side note, some roots might have algae on them and they green up anyway, but it doesn't mean they're alive. Those are algae deposits. These roots do not have algae deposits. They actually green up when wet. So I did discover quite a few live roots, but the dead roots that I cut, they all looked pretty suspicious to me. In what regard? They all had a particular color, which was dark purple. Now, if you're not aware, last year I had a major, let's say, orchid collection loss. Many of my orchids suffered from a disease, a fungal infection called fusarium. And ever since then, sadly, we kind of discovered that many orchids are infected with fusarium. And if not treated, or if the plant is very sick, it can be quite the deadly disease. In any case, it is not a joke. Identifying this disease is quite easy. All you need to do is cut into a stem or a rhizome in the case of sympodial orchids, and if you see a purple ring around that rhizome or stem, that's a clear sign of fusarium. And because some of you have asked, why is this a sign of fusarium, there is an article, which I will link you down below to, which suggests that that purpleness is actually a toxic substance that the fungus releases, and that's why it's purple. It's not that it's a pigment which many orchids have. So according to that article, this is the diagnosis sign, and well, we have no choice but to believe it at this point. And from experience, whatever orchid had that purple ring, yes, it was clearly impaired in comparison to other orchids. Now, that purpleness or the purple ring doesn't only restrict itself to rhizomes and stems. It can actually do the very same thing around the roots because the fungus enters the orchid through the root system. So all the roots that I cut away from the Mimi Palmer were purple, and I really hope it translates into the picture. It was pretty clear. So then I started to cut into the stem, and lo and behold, there was a thin but visible purple ring, which meant this orchid was infested with fusarium. So, as suggested by articles which describe the disease and how to treat it, I cut away into the tissue more and more, sterilizing my cutting tool with each cut until I reached healthy tissue. And I would just like to show you this tissue. There you go. I hope you can see through the pot. There is no purpleness or purple ring anywhere on the stem. At some point I only found a little bit of purple on one side. That was enough to tell me that the disease is still there, so I kept cutting. So this is what I'm left with at the moment. This is the entire orchid. Now it seemed really weird to me that this orchid, with apparently what I thought was a good root system, and if you look at it, it's not really that bad, was so dehydrated. However, I don't think the dehydration occurred because of the fusarium, because then I started to work on the other one, the Colmarie. And yet again, the same story. I had some dead roots that looked purple. I started to cut into the stem and behold, a purple ring. I kept cutting until I reached clear tissue. There you go. And I know you might see a ring, but don't worry, it's just a brown ring due to the sheets. It's not purple anymore. I think I cut quite a bit from this one. And sadly, because I had to cut so much from this one, I am only left with a tiny little stump, which still absorbs water, so it's better than nothing, obviously. But yeah, the Colmarie sadly is not in the greatest shape. However, the Mimi Palmer does have quite a few roots. Now, why do I say that the fusarium is not necessarily the cause of their decline? Well, first of all, how advanced the disease was. And yes, I know it might look like I cut a lot of the stem, but in comparison to the cases that I previously had, it's really not much, trust me. So I presume the disease is pretty new. It might have happened in the past year. Also, if we take a look at the orchid, it managed to bloom. The blooms look okay. They don't really seem to look very sick. The leaf span is okay. They don't appear to have much deficiencies. This discoloration might be a deficiency, but might not be. The Vandachostylis usually have some yellowy leaves like this. I won't go as far as to say that this is a sign, this is a deficiency. And P.S., a little tip, whenever you see something that you consider weird or that it's not supposed to be like that on an orchid, the best thing you can do is just go on Google and search for pictures of that orchid. So yes, because the infection was not super spread and the orchids really don't look like they are on their deathbed, I presume that the infection actually started due to mistreatment. An orchid with this amount of roots, and P.S., these roots are in good tissue. There is no more fusarium here, so they do function, they do hydrate the orchid. Where was I? So an orchid with this quantity of roots in good tissue is not allowed to be this dehydrated unless you don't water it. And I'm guessing this is pretty much what happened to these orchids. Now, Jessica is not the one who cared for them previously to sending them to me. They belonged to somebody else or they came from a nursery, I'm not entirely sure. But wherever they were previously to Jessica obtaining them, I suppose they were mistreated. I suppose they were put under some sort of stress, and whenever you do that, chances that pathogens will start to attack and will take over orchids are a lot higher. So my suspicion is that the pathogen entered the root as a result of some stress. And wherever they were, they had access to this pathogen. And it's pretty clear to see in the case of the Mimi Palmer. Yes, she was mistreated, she was not watered enough probably, but in the case of the Vandachostylis, it's not that obvious, unless we look at the length of the leaves. Let's see, do we see how wide the bottom leaves are? Do we see how progressively smaller they tend to get towards the top of the orchid? This is not supposed to happen. And yes, these are new leaves, but we do have these ones which are not new. And hopefully you can see here the difference. We have maybe 4 or 5 centimeters difference. This is not allowed to happen on a healthy orchid. In the case of sympodial orchids such as oncidiums, yes, I think we all already know that they can create tiny pseudobulbs when they're stressed. With monopodial orchids which don't have pseudobulbs, this happens as well, but it reflects in leaf span. Since they don't have pseudobulbs, you cannot have a smaller stem. So with a sympodial such as a Vanda or a Phalaenopsis, you will have tiny leaves at the top if something stresses the orchid and it impairs its growth. Furthermore, I had to cut more of the stem on this one than on the Mimi Palmer. And the Mimi Palmer, if we take a look, it doesn't really have that decline in leaf span, let's say like this one has. So I'm guessing the Mimi Palmer was maybe a recent addition to that collection, whatever that collection might have been, and it contacted the pathogen more recently. And the Colmarie maybe did so quite a while ago, because this looks like an orchid which has been a little bit mistreated for a while now. You can also observe that it didn't bloom before, and this is quite strange. Vandachostylis and their hybrids usually bloom at a much smaller size than this. So it didn't bloom. It looks like the leaves have gotten shorter and shorter. The pathogen was higher up the stem. I suspect there's only one explanation to this. It has been mistreated for longer than the Mimi Palmer. So my quest right now is to bring these orchids to health. Because we are dealing with an infection, we need to make sure that these orchids are not watered in the same space or in the same buckets with the other Vanda orchids. And of course they have their own little bowl in which I water them. Also, they do not sit close to my other Vandas. They sit on the other side of my greenhouse actually. And I am making sure they don't drip over any other orchid. Yes, I did take care of the stem of the affected area, but I cannot be sure that I eliminated all of the infection and the spores and so on. Now, regarding the rehydration issue, or how I like to maintain orchids which don't really have enough root systems, particularly Vandas which I don't keep potted, I will make a separate video actually, because I really want to talk about the things that I do and the things that I don't. It's a more elaborate discussion, so don't worry, I'll make a video about it and how I intend to keep these orchids hydrated, but maybe it's gonna be for tomorrow or Monday. But also I could do something else and actually treat them with a fungicide. Now, I'm not the best person to talk about this. If you know me, you know that I have a serious thing against hazardous or toxic substances. Last year when I decided to use the insecticide, I just seriously didn't feel good. I get anxiety attacks whenever I deal with this stuff, so I'm not gonna go through that. Most probably these orchids will not be treated with fungicides. That's just how I do things. It doesn't mean it's correct, it doesn't mean it's good. So for this reason, I will link you down below to a video from Anna Maria, which talks more about how to treat fusarium. And if you have further question about this type of treatment, I'm sure she's more than happy to answer to you. I, on the other hand, will not make treatments. So there we have it. Such a shame. These are just so beautiful. I'm just the happiest person ever that I got to see the flowers of the Mimi Palmer, because I've been dreaming for this orchid for about 4 years right now, and it smells so nice and so beautiful. And finally I have it in front of me, and I'm a little heartbroken because she has to be a little sick. But if I can manage to make her better together with the Colmarie, I'm gonna be a very happy mommy. So alrighty guys, this was the video for today. I'll keep you up to date, of course. And you know the drill. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe to my channel for regular orchids and plants videos. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. And with that said, I'll see you all next time. Bye!